Okay, so here we are. The Spire has reappeared. And let's go right in. Now, as you know, there are three segments of the Spire: the gateway, the high halls, and the laboratory. The gateway, or the entryway, as I sometimes forget and call it, is just these first four that are right here, and then we can pass, as well as the next tier, the next tier, and the next tier. So there's 4 tiers of 4 in each of these 3 segments. I find that up until the high halls, things are relatively easy. I hope everyone's finding them that way, because honestly, these are the ones that are not that difficult. Once we get into the second and third tiers, then yes, things are more complicated. But these, hopefully, everybody is going through pretty smoothly. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. I am going to go over kind of what my concept is for catering, because I think that's important later on. Not so much right now, but later on. So as I mentioned earlier, I do cater the first segment entirely while we're in here. So we're going to do that through the diplomatic convince stage, assuming the computer lets us do it. There we go. Now I do what I call the pattern, and this is my idea of how to try to have some consistency. I don't know if built this in, or if it's just a matter of statistics that I'm using something that is it follows a kind of conventional repeating status. So I've simply taken the options we have in their order. So I start with the coins that are available, and then the supplies, and then the magic dust, and then I repeat. And this is the pattern. So the pattern is to go through this. Now, there will be more to this in a moment as we get into more deeper things. So let's see what we do with this. I've knocked 3 off right, well, 2 off right in the first place. We've got 2 left that we don't have any idea about, other than that one of them is going to be a supplies. Now, if we follow the pattern's going to be that we start with the first available thing and go to the next, except we never duplicate. So if we'd still had a coin left and there was a coin here, we obviously wouldn't put a coin in, because we already know a coin doesn't work there. But we do know that the coin's out and this is in, so we'll go with this pattern. But we come to here at the end where that doesn't work, and we already know that this one's not a supply, so we're going to make that a dust, because that's a guarantee. We know that one's going to work. Now, this was a chance, because we knew one of these was a supply and the other wasn't. So we went, and in this case, it's actually backwards. But we still got that within 3. And, you know, the thing I want to point out here, too, is I'm doing these because, to me, 16,000 planks is nothing. Now, granted, these are some decent amounts of coin and supplies when you keep racking them up over and over again. But we're not going to worry about that too much, because these are quickly replenished. I'd like to think that for all of us here, if you've just collected everything and you have the good number of residences and a good number of warehouse or workshops, that you're coming up with plenty of these. You shouldn't have to go into instance for these from the Spire. If you are, then you may need more residences or more workshops to balance things out, same as you would if you were running out of supplies when you're trying to make troops, or make orcs for that matter. So we're going to do the same thing again. We're just going to follow the pattern, see what it does to us in the first place. Now, in this case, we've only got 1. But we're back to the pattern here, and this tells us a couple interesting things. First of all, we know that we only have 2 left, and we have 2 of those already on here. So we know that the first one is not going to be the coin, because it's already been used. So we go planks, coin, but then this one is not the planks, and it only leaves us the coin, and we go plank. And then this one wasn't the coin, so we take that again. Now, some of you will find that when you get into sentient goods, you start being concerned about the choices. And in fact, what you'll really be concerned about is when we get into where it'll want orcs or seeds or mana. Then you may want to, under certain circumstances, if you're in a chapter and you're really desperate for those items, particularly in the higher up tiers, you may want to play it safe and go with combat where you're just losing troops potentially, as opposed to the things that may be more expensive for you. If you can't afford 3,700 of a sentient good, though, then I'm worrying about your production capabilities. So I just go through this way. Now, this time, we still have all three of these available. We know that one of these has got to be supplies because it's going to the wrong person, but there's two of these, so this makes this part easy because there's only the three and the other two are already done, so we know this has to be the supply one. So that leaves us two things that have to be something else, one of which has to be the moonstone. So we're going to do coin and moonstone because that's in the pattern going left to right. And there you go. That takes them all. Now here, see, if you were trying to gather orcs, this still isn't a huge amount of orcs like it would be in later segments, but you might want to use combat. I never do in these first levels. I just don't feel that's a large enough number. Now, we've gotten rid of the gum, the tree gum, and we know once again that we've got two of these items, the supplies and the orcs. We don't want to duplicate those, but we also know if we follow the pattern, we're going to put coins in here, supplies in here, and oops, that can't work because we can't do orcs because we already know that's there. So let's go and swap these two like this, and that gives us different places for the options that can be where we're knowing that we've got one place that's got to be filled. In this case, they were in the one was right for supplies, but not for the orcs, but we get it within the third. Now, a lot of you are probably saying, well, I've got to take all three for each of these that you've done so far. Well, it doesn't always work that way, because sometimes you'll get it in the first try, particularly on this very first segment. You'll get it on the first try, because these are really simple. But for me, sure, I'd love to do every one of them on the first try, but that's not really likely. Even with the pattern here and everything working out well for us, there's almost always going to be a second time that you're going through in most of these. Now here we only have two things left. That's interesting. We have one of the two, so we know this one's going to have to be supplies, period. And the others, we're just going to follow the pattern and then see what that gives us. And in this case, it didn't work. It went the opposite way, and sometimes that'll happen. But we still did this within three because we knew where we were. And partly the pattern, I find, if it doesn't fill things in for you, it at least usually reveals what's available. And you're saying, well, heck, I just poke different things in when I feel like it's right. And that's where I think the problem is. If you don't follow some sort of pattern, it doesn't have to be my pattern. You could go the opposite way or something, but there's a consistency in doing this pattern this way that gives you a chance statistically to see what options are there. If you just go kind of guessing on a gut instinct, unless you got really good gut instincts, that's probably not going to really work for you. Here, if we do the pattern, we can't start with coin, even though that is the first one because we've already used coin. So we're just going to pop like this. These all work out because we don't have any duplications. And we got rid of a few of them. And we know that this one now is supplies. And we know that this one, since it's not supplies, since it's already been there, is a coin. So that's a gimme. And that one's done. We happen to have a nice little bonus there. And this time the pattern didn't work for us. Now, I would suggest you never use diamonds on this because that's just a waste of diamonds. They're very valuable. Use them on something like expansions or magic residences or magic workshops because you know to buy them or upgrade them. I would rather go into a second round of this, which this early in the Spire doesn't usually happen to me, but it does on occasion. So you kind of have to live with your losses along with your wins because that's just kind of the way the cookie crumbles. Now we're back to 2 again, and we already have those 2 represented up here, so we know that all we have to do is just do the one that isn't the one that shows up on the other on the list. So we just do the opposing sides. Follow the pattern. We've got 2 left. We're going to still follow the pattern. Now, this one is actually kind of a question thing. Do you follow the pattern in the sense that you did the first 2 things before and then you hadn't used this and this should be the next part of the pattern, or this would be the first part of the pattern? Well, I've never really figured out a good way to look at that one. However, I always just basically go with my rule, which is to follow the pattern, because that way I don't beat myself up if I do the wrong thing. If I do this and win, it's great, but if I do it and lose, then I didn't really technically go to the beginning of the pattern again and start. And in this case, I did lose. This is going to be a horrible video because this normally I breeze through this much better than this. So this is showing you about how bad things can be for me. So I don't know that that's going to be very inspiring to anybody. And I should point out too that, you know, well, and really quickly here, these obviously are just telling me that the opposite thing is whatever, so I can fill it in. I should mention though that, you know, these, oh good, I finished something in the event. These are my paths through here. You're all going to come up with your own. That's one of the things about the game that's great, is that there is no one strict path that you follow to do things the right way. You're going to follow whatever path you like. I'm trying to show you some options, and hopefully these will work for you. Now, I, as a general rule, don't spend time instance on speeding up in the Spire, because I use time instance to make troops exclusively because I want troops, and I burn them up by going up in the higher levels of the Spire and the tournament, because I go pretty far in the tournament. But we're going to scrap that today because I'm trying to show some things. So we're going to use time instance to speed ahead. So we still don't have really terribly expensive costs here. You know, these add up, but again, you should have tons and tons of coins and supplies. Really, if you've got decent residences and workshops, unless you're using them on something else just before you're doing this and you didn't replenish them, then you need more residences or workshops, because these should always be in abundance. Or at least that's the way it's always worked best for me. We fill in the pattern. We got rid of the first couple. We actually know that these out of the 4 are the only 3 that we're going to count on. So that helps us in one way, because we know we're not going to use supplies. So that cuts things down. If we do the pattern, it actually works out so that we don't duplicate anything. And now it's actually even easier because if we were to do, if we just look, we can see there's 2 works here, but not 1 here. We're in the wrong person. So 2 supplies, 2 coins, so or 2 crystal, 2 coins. So we really just put these in the right place where you can't miss. That one was just shown to you what to put in. So again, we're following the pattern. Patterns left us with just 2 things here. This one's already told to us, and we know that we can't have a coin duplicate again because that wouldn't do anything for us. So that one's pretty much given to us also, and we finish that one up. Now, mind you, if anybody has a better plan on this, I'd love to see your video. If you have something where you're doing everything in 1 or 2 rounds on this, then hey, I want to know what you're doing. But I'm just trying to pass along my suggestions on what's working for me, because some of you have told me that you just still have great problems with the Spire, and I'm hoping that this will help you at least somewhat. Now we're going to go back and do what we were doing before, but we're not going to do Gumtree here because obviously it's already worked in there and that's not passing. But otherwise, I'm going to follow the pattern and see where that leads us. And that actually worked and gave us everything. So we get rid of the coins. We've got 3 of the 4 that we know we need, but there's 4, and this one could be the 4th one. So we really just probably are better going through and putting coins in, except these 2 now would be duplications. So I'm just going to swap them. It's one of the rare things I do that doesn't follow the pattern, but we know those aren't going to follow the pattern that way, and this is often gets you at least 1 of them. Now we're left with just 2, and we know what each one is, so we can fill in the scrolls from over there and the supplies here, and that's a gimme, and it's done.